Whoop whoop, whoop whoop, it's Whoop Whoop Wednesday and I have a joke for you. It's a bit of a long one, but it's worth it. A guy spent 5 years traveling all around the world making a documentary on native dances. At the end of this time, he had every single native dance of every indigenous culture in the world on film, or so he thought. He wound up in Australia, in Alice Springs, so he popped into a pub for well-earned beer. He got to talking to one of the local Aborigines and told him all about his project. The Aborigine asked the guy what he thought of the butcher dance. "The butcher dance?" he said, confused. "What's that?" "What? You didn't see the butcher dance?" "No, I've never heard of it." "Mate, you're crazy," the Aborigine replied. "How can you say you filmed every native dance if you haven't seen the butcher dance?" I got a corroboree on film just the other week. Is that what you mean?" No, the butcher dance is much more important than the corroboree." "Oh," said the man. "Well, how can I see this butcher dance then?" "Aye, mate, the butcher dance is way out in the wilderness. It'll take you many days of travel to go see it." "Look, I've been everywhere, from the forests of the Amazon to the deepest, darkest Africa, to the frozen wastelands of Arctic, filming these dances. Nothing will prevent me from recording this one last dance." "Okay, mate," the Aborigine replied, shrugging. "You drive north along the highway towards Darwin. After you drive 197 miles, you'll see the dirt track veer off to the left. Follow this dirt track for 126 miles till you see a big, huge, dead gum tree. The biggest tree you've ever seen. Here you gotta leave the car because it's much too rough for driving. You strike out due west into the setting sun. Walk 3 days until you hit a creek. You follow this creek to the northwest. After 2 days you'll find where the creek flows out of a rock mountain. It's much too difficult to cross the mountains there. So you head south for half a day until you see a pass through the mountains. The pass is very difficult and very dangerous. It'll take you maybe 3 days to get through it. On the other side, head northwest for 4 days till you reach a big, huge rock, 20 feet high and shaped like a man's head. From the rock, walk due west for 2 days, then you'll find the village. You'll be able to see the butcher dance there." So the guy grabbed his camera crew and equipment and headed out. After a couple of hours, he found the dirt track. The track was in shocking state, and he was forced to crawl along at a snail's pace. So he didn't reach the tree until dusk, where he was forced to set up camp for the night. He set out bright and early the next morning. His spirits were high, and he was excited about the prospect of capturing this mysterious dance that he'd never heard of. True to the directions that had been given, he reached the creek by 3 days and followed it another 2 until he reached the Rocky Mountain. The merciless sun was starting to take its toll, and the spirits of both himself and his crew were starting to flag. But warily they trudged on, finally finding the pass through the mountains. Nothing would prevent him from completing his live stream. Yes, this is written down because I can't remember this much. The mountains proved to be every bit as treacherous as their guide had said, and at times they despaired of even getting their bulky equipment through. And after 3.5 days of back-breaking effort, they finally forced their way through a clearing. Continuing their long trek, when they reached a huge rock 4 days later, their water was running low and their feet were covered with blisters. But they steeled themselves and headed on for the last leg of the journey. 2 days later, they virtually staggered into the village. To their relief, the natives welcomed them and let them have fresh water and fed them, and they began to feel like a new man. Once they recovered enough, the guy went before the village chief and told him that he'd come to film their butcher dance. "Oh, mate," he said, "very bad you come today. Butcher dance was last night. You too late. You missed dance." "Well, when do you have the next one?" "Not till next year." "Well, I've come all this way. Couldn't you just hold an extra dance for me tonight?" No, Chief said. "Butcher dance very holy. Only hold one a year. You want to see Butcher dance? You come back next year." Understandably, the guy was devastated, but he had no other option but to head back to civilization and back home. The following year, he headed back to Australia and, determined not to miss out again, set out a week earlier than before. He was quite willing to spend a week in the village before the dances performed in order to ensure that he was present to witness it. But right from the start, things went wrong. Heavy rains that year turned the dirt track into mud, and the car got bogged down every few miles. Finally, they had to abandon their vehicles and slog through the mud on foot almost half the distance to the tree. They reached the creek and the mountains without further problems. Halfway through the mountain pass, they were struck by a fierce storm that raged for several days, during which time they were forced to cling forlornly to the mountainside until it subsided. Then, before they had traveled a mile out from the mountains, one of the crew sprained his ankle badly, slowing down the rest of the journey greatly. Eventually, having lost all sense of how long they had been traveling, they staggered into the village right at noon. "The butcher dance," the man gasped. "Please don't tell me I'm too late to see it." The chief recognized him and said, No, white fella. Butcher dance performed tonight. You just come in time." Whew. Relieved beyond measure, the crew spent the rest of the afternoon setting up their equipment and preparing to capture the night's ritual on celluloid. As dusk fell, the natives started to cover their bodies they covered their bodies with feathers and mud and all kinds of things. And spectators and alike, and the wizened old figure with elaborate swirling designs all over his body entered this circle. They had this big circle of people. "What's he doing?" the man whispered to the chief. "Hush," the chief whispered back. "You first white man to ever see our sacred rituals must remain silent. Holy man, he asks that the spirits of the dream world watch as we demonstrate our devotion to them through our dance. And if they like our dancing, they will be so gracious to watch over us and protect us for another year." The chanting of the holy man reached a stunning crescendo before he removed himself from the circle. The rhythmic pounding of the drums boomed out across the land, and the natives began to sway to the stirring rhythm. The guy became caught up in the fervor of the moment. This was it. He realized beyond all doubt that his wait had not been in vain. He was about to witness the ultimate performance of the rhythm and movement that ever conceived by mankind. The chief strode up to his position in the circle, and in a big booming voice, he started to sing. "You put your right arm in, you put your right arm out, you put your right arm in, and you shake it all about."